Welcome to Swatch's Livestream number 63, take 2. So I adjusted some of the settings for you who tried to join in live a second ago. Hopefully we've corrected that and we're not dropping as many frames. Anyway, I'm your host Kerr, illustrator, best known for my work with Magic the Gathering, Dungeons & Dragons, and of course as the art educator here on Swatches. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the concepts submitted in for the Sword and Owl Art Challenge. And I will be going a little faster on this one than I normally do. I'm getting over a cold and I just don't have the energy to do a multi-hour again. So we'll clip through some of these, but let's get a running start and just take a look at the outline. This is what the artists were trying to create. Let me get OBS out of the way so I can see comments. There we go. Yeah, OBS is saying... yeah, we're not dropping any frames on this side, so I think we're good. And let me adjust that so I can see. There we go. So they had a choice of between two different subject matters for the entries. One was Kinslayer, Blade of the Warlord. It is a ice-bladed sword of the giants. And Odru, the Lord of the Owls. In which case, it was pretty open about what you wanted to do with it, the direction that you wanted to take it. All I was really wanting was to do a challenge where people would be pushed to do something other than your standard human character. I know characters are really popular, and I have nothing against them. I love them. They're my favorite subjects. But it's good to be rounded out and be able to do some other stuff as well. Okay, so that is what they're doing. Some of the references that I had provided is right here. Different images of owls, a lot of different ways that you could take it. Lord of the Owls, is he a spirit? Is he a real owl? Is he giant? Which he's supposed to be pretty big, but how big is he? That's up to the artist. And the Kinslayer should be a sort of brutish ice blade with steel combination and have a northern sort of setting in behind it. Michael, good to see you. Arlie, Will, good to see you guys. How's it going? So let's jump in and take a look. I'll leave this here in Photoshop and then we might refer back to it. But we have, I think we have a full round out this time. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yeah, so everybody sent in an image this time. How about we go the opposite direction? Normally we go alphabetical. Let's go opposite to alphabetical this time, just to change it up. Okay, so this one is submitted in by William Hallet. And a couple, let me get my notes out of the way. So you can see his image here. He's just does have a line drawing at this point. Still playing around with some of the values and the color schemes. But we'll go through the different numbers here and some of his comments. Hey Clint, you said the approach was broad, so I've gone with the nighttime nocturnal party theme. That's perfectly fine, William. I think that's a great direction to go with it. I can see maybe the owl isn't the central character here, but I like the concept and composition, so I ran with it. Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. He is the biggest character, and while obviously the girl, I think, is kind of seen as the central figure, I'm not trying to, be hard on you on this. And this isn't a challenge where I'm going to make a big deal about that. So I think it perfectly fits fine. So, and you're right. It follows the idea that he's probably the one putting this on. He's probably the one that gathered all this together. I get that sort of impression from it. So that's cool. Okay. Number 2. I was thinking about this piece, and I was thinking about some of your other pieces. And this is sort of off just this specific piece, but I'll mention it because it applies to you, and it might apply to some of the other artists watching. And that is, I don't know that your normal commissioned artist route is necessarily what you're looking for. This image in particular has such a good feel to it, and it evokes such a good feeling that I think you should consider some other options. Like, you shared this out on the Facebook group, and there was a lot of positive feedback to it. And I don't think it's just people being supportive. I think it's people that see something like this and go, that makes me feel good. That makes me want to smile. And I'm going to suggest you consider doing your own art. If you want to get into doing more art, don't necessarily look at having to take commissions. Consider doing your own stuff. And I think Patreon could actually do well for you, or potentially, because people would like to see something like this on a monthly basis, and just see you kind of creating some of this. And it's particularly pieces that make people feel a certain way, and your pieces do. And so it's a way to highlight that and capitalize on it. Also consider doing like a series of these images and getting them printed into a book. I picked up a book by J.A.W. Cooper. I forgot to bring it with me, but it's a collection of her animal drawings that she's done, and she has a very particular style. And if you like one of her images, you're pretty much going to like all of them. And I think your images have that similar approach. It's also something that you could consider doing events like conventions, and because it has such I want to say like I'm sorry, my brain is going slow. This cold has slowed my brain down quite a bit. It has such an inviting feeling to it. It's almost nostalgic as far as the art style. And it evokes something like that, and it's fun and it's lighthearted. So I'm going to just suggest you watch some videos on that about earning money through Patreon, through art events, conventions, that sort of thing. So let's move through. Number 3, right off, I'm going to say we probably take out this lantern. It's almost right in the middle in the image, and it's this really geometric shape almost right in the middle. And I don't think it necessarily has to be right there. There's no reason it needs to be there. So I'm gonna say let's take that out. Now, there were some comments on the group site about the fox and the way that the two of them are interacting, and his pose and him licking her. I'm gonna have to agree that it's a little odd. It's I think it's just a little odd, and I would consider changing that. Like, if you want to keep the fox head, and it's a nice head, maybe just have the fox like coming around the owl, and he's back here, and she can just be turning and talking to like the mice. So like maybe the mice is saying something, and then she's leaning over and she's kind of laughing at whatever the mice are telling her. So you can still have a lot of the same stuff going on, but yeah, just the interaction is kind of weird. As far as the image, you were saying that you were thinking more of the green than the blue. I think green's fine. That's fine. You probably need to have a little blue in there, just maybe up in the sky. But I do like the direction with the lighting, in as not like doing the dark shadow, because he seems too ominous when he's all silhouetted like that. But my thought is, if we're getting rid of the lantern, then I'm almost thinking like, what if it is more of a party where I'm almost thinking like Japanese lanterns and the Japanese lights. Like maybe there's some lights, like maybe there's a branch. I need to get something darker than that. That don't really show up. Maybe that like there's a branch here. There's some trees around, and then they've got like paper lanterns hanging down. And then there's maybe some little lanterns, like the little paper lanterns down on the ground here. And then you can see the glow from some of them here. Maybe there's a string of them that goes back behind that wing. And so you can play with the idea that there is light and just throw in the idea, oh, they've hung up some lanterns or there's some candles burning, something like that. And that would allow you to take out the kind of the offending lantern there in the middle. Okay, anything else? No, like I said, I need to be moving faster because I'm kind of tired. But that's it. Hopefully you find that helpful, Will. And I look forward to seeing what you're going to do with it. And please, do follow your initial thought of keeping the lines and seeing about doing one where you're not painting out the lines. So this one is by Tyler Ville. And he was just wanting to push the image further, wasn't sure really how to go about it. So one of my first thoughts was to make a change in the overall composition and a little bit in the sizing, where a lot of this is sort of, I want to say redundant. It's useless. This isn't serving any purpose, any of this. So I'm going to just say let's crop in on them. And I'll make better use of the space. And also, what you have is the scene of a very small character facing off against, not facing off, but being face to face with this very large creature. And we want to heighten that feeling by pulling in and really filling the frame more with this, because this is all we really care about of what's going on here. Although I would suggest moving some of your little birdies would need to be moved over so that they are more on, this part of the frame once you crop it. But those were a good idea. I would keep those. Will says, lantern's a good idea, and the lantern was a last-minute addition. I forgot to mention that in the end will be lots of fireflies around. Oh, I love fireflies. That's an excellent idea. Yeah, absolutely go with that. Okay, so composition. Number 2, you're talking about the lighting. And I think the side light it's okay. It really depends the kind of mood you're trying to get. And if you don't want him to be too ominous, which he could be very easily, then some light like this is probably good. I would consider... Let me make a new layer. I'm going to set it to darken. I would probably reduce it just a little bit, though. Which layer is that drawn on? That one. Okay, hang on. Let's turn that one off. I would probably have the light just be hitting part of the face there, and then hitting the hand here. So it's more about the light kind of coming down and the cone of it hitting here, and then that would probably have like a cast for a ways, and maybe it just catches a bit back here, which would give off the back side of this, which is nice, but it would be more diffused, so it would be more like that. And then you would have the silhouette of, but the shadow on that side of this character. I think that would be more engaging. It's not too far off of what you have, but we're just focusing the light down a little bit so he's a little bit more mysterious without coming across to like being evil. Okay, next up. I meant that to be on this layer. There we go. Number 2 is sort of the design of this guy, where I feel like you kind of need to push him one way or the other. And he's obviously he's a human owl mix. So he's got kind of a humanoid hand, but he's got humanoid shoulders, but kind of like an owl face. I would say let's do it one or the other, where like if he has an owl face, consider like these are very roundish faces. Like the face being more round. And then like their necks, they don't necessarily have like a little skinny neck. They have, a neck that would come down more like this. And then see if you can find some good images of a owl claw, and try to mix that with a bit more with a human hand. So maybe it has the thumb like you would have on a human hand, but it basically has the construction of a claw. So you're probably going to see like longer talons. Then you're going to see like the pad. They have like the bigger pad right there on the front. And then you're going to have the big joint. You know, it's going to be something more like that. And then again, the same thing here, where it's going to be a bit more of a mix between the two. I think it'd be kind of cool. The horns or antlers, whatever you're going with there, I think that's kind of cool. Consider even doing more with that, giving them some nice twist. One of the things about horns, a lot of people don't think about. A lot of times, people think of them as just cylinders, but they're not really that much. If you look like at a ram's horn, it's usually more of a like a squarish, and it twists. So you'd have like this plane coming into this plane, then the plane sort of almost like a ribbon, it twists around itself. And so take a look at those and see if you can incorporate some good twists and edges to the horns instead of just kind of little cylinders. Or if if on this guy you wanted to go more humanoid, then consider pushing him even further. So like his face, if his face is kind of going to be longer, then let his face be really long. And then consider like moving his eyes out further so that the face can be even longer. You know, push it either being more owl or more like surreal. The feather here, unless you're going to make a more consistent thing and having it throughout the entire image, let's get rid of the feather. Anything that there's only one of, the solo presence of it makes it more, gives it more importance. So I think probably here we could take it out unless you want to add more feathers elsewhere, and then it makes that one less important. Okay, good stuff, Tyler. Looking forward to seeing what you do with the rest. Madao. Alright, so you're saying I modified the template to include my thumbnail research. Okay, cool. Yeah, you guys, if you need to adjust the template, that's fine. I don't really care. I just want to make sure that we're still going to be getting in, the major references and the studies. But if you're running a slightly different proportion to your image, then yeah, that's fine. Begin trying to render the ice and crystal effect, but I can't figure out how to do it properly. Some insight on that will be lovely. Also, can't get my head out of the structure of foreground darker, background lighter. So, on the ice crystal effect, we got some good things to look at here. So let's kind of break it down and say, okay, I wanted to paint some ice crystal. What's some things that I should be paying attention to? Because these seem pretty, I know, Rodney, yours is up here. It pulled up his first. I'll close his and we'll get to yours. So one of the things you'll notice here is that it's generally darker in the middle. Let me toss in first that ice comes in a lot of different ways. All right, there isn't just one kind of ice. Ice can come with a lot of different colors. It can be really clear. It can be very cloudy. It can be broken off in different ways depending on, what's in the water, how it was froze, or whether it's fast or slow or all that sort of stuff. So what we could see from these is, and I think this is pretty effective, it's darker in the middle where it's thickest. And then it gets lighter on the edges where it gets more frosty. And you also see that the shapes and the edges inside of it are lighter. So the edges, any point where it gets thin up to an edge, it's going to be getting lighter. Also, the more that you see straight through it, the more likely it's going to be transparent if it is a clear ice. But the more angled it is, the more that you're seeing it at a acute angle, then the more, I would say more opaque it is, but probably the lighter it will become. So for yours, I don't have time to paint the whole thing, but giving yourself a base. Actually, maybe we could just do, I'm going to do a multiply layer with a light sort of teal color. Blue. And then if you could see through it, it'll be darker back there. Maybe this blade is darker as well. And then we could come on top of that, and then we could get our yeah. I keep wanting to do it like faster. Slower and doing it more. And so then you start coming up in here and creating this sort of pattern. And you can think about it as creating layers. Actually going over this sort of thing in my materials video that I'm working on. And you're creating the volume first. You're creating the thickness of all the ice, and then you can come in here and add these sorts of things. It's going to get lighter on the edges. Some of these will catch a bit more light than others. Have a little wet specular lights off of some of them. Which ones? I don't know. I would just kind of guess until it looked right. But maybe some of these are catching a angle like that. Yeah, Vala can answer your question there, David. You can find the files for these and jump in with the community on the Swatches art group on Facebook. You can just go to swatches.group and it will link you right to the correct Facebook. So it'll be something on that line. So try to establish the thickness of the ice and kind of the dark to light pattern, and then start putting in your edges. And I'm taking time to do that on this one because there's several of you doing this, and I think somebody else even asked about this. And look at the angular shapes. You don't get SE kind of curves. You get a lot of like triangular shapes, kind of bent polygon shapes, a lot of straight edges, that sort of thing. And think about it's almost like waves. If you would almost think about, it creates kind of wave patterns, and that it's dipping down and coming up. Don't just draw lines on it like they're cracks, because they're not. They're high edges. So something on that line. As far as the overall lighting, yeah, it can be easy to get stuck in the background is light, foreground is darker. But yeah, when you get to a night scene, that's completely different because it's the opposite. things in the foreground are light, things in the background are dark. What you can think about on some of your value studies is to think in terms of gradients. So here maybe we have dark on the top with the background. It gets a little bit lighter as it comes down. And then we want to have opposite gradients against each other so things stand out. So I'm going to have a lighter or mid-tone here in the ice, but then I'm going to let the ice go dark down here so that it stands out more from the sky. And then here, maybe I have a light coming down on the sword. So overall, the entire sword is brighter than anything else in the scene. So he's going to stand out that way. Or you could do the opposite. I mean, you could have your light sky kind of like you have it here. I'm just simplifying it. And then you have your snow wall. It's going to be kind of a mid-tone. And that allows both of them to sort of drop back in the back. And there's just sort of a whiteout going on with all the snow. And then with the blade, we could go into like shadow. So like the top of this is probably in shadow. And then there's a light coming down and just catching this end of it. So this end of the blade is nice and bright. And that way the light is, we have the light here. And we have the dark here. And we have a dark here. And we have a light there. And that's a real simple way to kind of think about values, about what you want to do. And the thing is, you can get away with about anything you want. Like, you can find a way to make it believable that this is this value, that that's a mid-tone, that this is dark. All right, you can change the lighting circumstance, the light direction. You can change the time of day. With all the variables at your hand, figure out whatever value scheme you want, and then make the scene match it. Make the scene, change to fit that. Okay. Next up. Number 3 is 3 and 4 kind of go together. Little fly, would you go on, please? Yep. Number 3 and 4 go together, and that's just the design of the sword. This simply looks like a sword that has ice stuck on the end of it, but it doesn't really look like an ice blade sword. And so, wow, that fly is just really obsessed with flying on my hand there. Okay. So let's see about maybe changing the design of some of these. I liked some of your earlier ones here, like the sword should have a design where it looks like the ice is part of the design of it, not just it's been encased in ice. So maybe, it has one side of it is the metal, and then the ice comes off and forms this kind of brutal blade, almost like it's a giant meat cleaver, and so the metal forms the spine of it that the ice adheres to, but the ice really is, I guess it's enchanted, right? It doesn't break or melt or anything. And then when we get here, we're looking at this massive, and some of it's to do with perspective, but we're looking at a massive amount of blade and ice and this very small handle and very small pommel. There's no balance to this, so maybe thinking of it as like a two-handed weapon, and we can move the thorns from being. This is like more rapier style. The reason they would put something around the hand like that on a rapier is because they're you're stabbing at each other, right? And so they have those guards, and that's kind of how a rapier works. But on this sort of thing, they need to be able to wield it around, which means they can't have, it's not a precise weapon. And a rapier makes sense that you can have a guard like that because you're only ever holding it with one hand and you're using it as kind of a piercing weapon. But this isn't. This is like a two-handed broadsword. And that means that you can't have anything in the way or you're not going to be able to switch hands or swing it. So if we could get the thorns, like the thorn shapes here, and just like it's kind of like wrapping a baseball bat with barbed wire, right? And you throw some of that going up into the blade, and maybe some of it goes into the ice and out the other side of the ice. It doesn't necessarily have to go around the whole thing. But I'm going to just kind of push you that direction with it. It's okay to be a little more brutish with it, not so refined. Okay, next up, Rodney. Now, Rodney's in here, I believe. Yes. Okay, so you were saying down here, we got two little flies now. Almost got them. Okay, you did a lot of variations, a lot of rough sketches, had a lot of references. You say it's kind of boring to me. Started color study. Okay, so yeah, Rodney and I had a consultation a couple of days ago, and I think maybe you're overthinking it now. I don't know, but I don't think it's boring. I think what you have here is really good, and I like the direction that it's going. I don't think you have anything to worry about. Maybe you've just been looking at it too much and you're overthinking it, but it's going in a good direction. And you're saying that you were looking at the color study here, and this is good. Let's combine what some of the good things are going on here, combine it with that one, and it's a solid image, man. I don't see any major changes needing to be going on with that. So I agree with both of those. That sort of nighttime greenish moonlight approach is very nice. Good direction images over here. Some of these suggestions as far as changes I would recommend is his talons, and you've got like the really, really fuzzy talons, and I'm going to suggest you finding some other references for that. So you're running with like this guy. I think you're probably going to be better for this guy because it's going to give you a clear silhouette of talons. I'm also thinking, and I might be completely wrong on this, but did they always have that much around their feet? Or is that like a seasonal thing? I'm thinking maybe they don't normally have that much around their feet. But anyway, I'm going to suggest you give like thinner, more clear talon shapes. And that's really good for the pose. I don't know that you really need to change that pose. Essentially, they do that sort of thing, and they spread it out kind of on each side like that. So they probably both would be coming up like something like that. Good expression reference there for his squawk. I do like the squawk. It looks like he made that change from this one, unless it's so dark I can't see it on that one. Oh no, he is. Okay. Yeah, I feel like maybe that one's doing slightly better. I would want to see maybe a little bend to the body. It feels like he's kind of arching forwards. I almost want to see him kind of twisting his body that way for it. This is also a more interesting shape with the tail feathers sticking out there. Now, I don't know if you want it that much, or I mean, it could be a little less, but this seems... this is just a big tangent. So right now we have this wing running into that claw, running into this hand, running into that claw, running into this wing. And it's just really unlikely, and it sort of creates this very clear division between the two of them, where it'd probably be better if we had these claws here, and there was some overlapping between them, and then we had some of those tail feathers breaking up that sort of that silhouette of the two of those, the wings into those tail feathers. And let's back up. Anything else about with the light? The lighting scheme is working pretty well for me, and I would just recommend think about before you commit which direction you want to go. One way is not right, one way is not wrong, but make sure that you know which one you want to go with. Like here we have the really bright moon basically silhouetting him. And here we have the same moonlight, but the moon is not seen. So, like you could have, this one's already so much more done. Let's just do that for a second. You can have the moonlight all back there like that, and that's cool. You can definitely do that. Or you can have the moonlight hitting the owl, and then you have that same night sky. So there, instead of seeing the moon, you see the moonlight hitting on the character. And then these could probably be bumped up even more. Something on that line, but figure out which one you want. We probably want to add some, either we need to run her into silhouette more so that she is easy to see, or we need to add some light to her and maybe she's catching some moonlight, something like that. But okay, let's stop it there on that one. Good place. You're in a good place. And let's just go back and grab some of the things that was working well from this one and bring that right over. I think the feathers are fantastic. It gives it a lot of sense of motion, as does the flying hair and the fabric. Definitely keep both of those. Let's just grab some better shapes, kind of what you had here, and slightly modify them for the overall pose and silhouette. Okay, Jonathan Monroe is up. He has no questions and comments, so we will just jump into whatever I want to chat about. Number one is... Did I not make a number one? I made two number twos. Okay, so number one will be this one up here. And that is just height versus width. So I'm going to bring up something here that I saved. This is an excerpt from my composition ebook. And I'm going to just pull it up and walk it through. Orientation. First choice in composition is that of orientation. Will the image be vertical or horizontal? The answer will set the context for the viewer and the mood. In these tower examples, we see the same scene, but each orientation elicits a slightly different feel by putting focus on different aspects of the scene. A horizontal frame reinforces the horizontal elements in the scene, and a vertical reinforces the vertical elements. Number one, the image is about how the tower, how tall the tower is, how the tower and the I'm sorry. The image is about how the tower and ground are at odds. So there's a very horizontal nature to the ground, very horizontal nature to the entire image, but then you have this abrupt T shape of the tower coming into it. Number two, the scene is about the vast height of the tower. So same image, different canvas orientation has changed how we perceive it and what is important. Rules of thumb: fill the frame with the subject. When in doubt, that's always a good one to fall back on. Match the orientation of the scene to the direction of the motion in the scene. If a rocket ship is taking off, you probably want a vertical scene to accent that, and you will be able to get more of the action in the scene that way. What aspect of the subject do you want to accentuate, and which direction do you want the eye to travel? So I bring that up and I talk about that because here we have a horizontal scene with predominantly a vertical subject matter, which sometimes works if the scene is being used to give sufficient context and narration to what is going on. But it isn't. It's not really doing that. So I'm going to suggest making this change. So this frame is exactly the same size as this frame. I just turned it sideways, and then I filled it with yours, and then I tilted the sword just a little bit. So I got more of the sword in. I added an entire pommel here. I got more of the sword, and it's 50% bigger, and the frame is the same size. So that's just going to be a better use of overall canvas space. And also, if this is for any kind of publication, it's always good to have more of your subject filling the frame. Because if you're looking at this on a card or printed small or in an icon on some game, then you're really limiting how much of that critical information the viewer is getting to see. So my suggestion, do it more like that. And next we're looking at number two. Number two, I really like the direction you're taking the sword design. Yeah, it's kind of brutish, it's brutal, it's not refined, and I think that's great. I think it needs to be carried out through the blade a bit more, but this part particularly is pretty cool. So let's not be changing that up too much. This seems like it doesn't really look like ice yet. It doesn't give that ice feel. It just feels like a solid flat piece that has beveled edges. So let's make sure we try to turn that into ice. And remember, that's going to have more of a feel with kind of polygonal shapes as they dip. And each one of these could be big dips. Kind of a wave pattern. So you just come in here and you start creating kind of terrain for what that blade is doing. And if you wanted to carry some of that, the thorns, you could carry the thorns, further if you wanted to, or if you want to have like, a metal piece on the end or something like that would be fine as well. Okay. Number three, number four. Number four, I'm guessing you're putting a giant skull back here, but I think it's not working too well because when you put it back there, it makes this feel like it's a dagger because we assume it to be a human-sized skull. And so I'm going to suggest taking that out. And just use something like this. I thought this was a really nice reference right here for the background. I think something right along that line would work really well, particularly if you stuck to sort of something about like that, because this has a lot of epic bright lights in it. This would keep it fairly simple to do, but it's toned down enough that it can really sit in the background and not be too obtrusive. So if you kind of look at that section there and use that as the pattern for what you want to do on the background, I think you're good to go. Appreciate the submission, Jonathan, and keep working at it. This one is by Jackie Kerr. Jackie, thank you for joining in. I hit the lever on my chair and it dropped it. Okay. You said, I went for a children's illustration style. I did not get finished. I hope a pencil sketch is acceptable. I struggle with composition and lighting mostly. Is a pencil sketch acceptable? Absolutely. If that's the way you like to work, if you like to work with pencil, and as long as it's legible, I can look at it and tell what I'm looking at, we're fine. And I struggle with composition and lighting mostly. Oh, somebody's burning out over there. Okay. The composition, I think you're fine. Maybe you generally have problems with it, but you're going with a very straightforward composition, figure in the middle, kind of encircling subject matter and secondary characters around him. No reason to get fancy with it, so I'm fine with that. I would talk about maybe some of the design and the pose of the character, and just talking about the scene a bit. The pose is sort of odd, like he's got his head kind of tilted down and his wings are sort of tilted, and I don't know what he's trying to do. I'm not sure what kind of pose he's trying to go for, or what, is he, or were you going for this sort of thing? Because here what we want to look at is a couple of things. Like, we want to think about the volume of what's going on. I think you're mainly thinking about shapes right now, so it's a good thing to start thinking about the volumes at this point. So let's say we have the head. The head is basically a sphere, and the body is basically an elongated sphere. But we want to look at how he's essentially over our eye view, so that would be going up. And then that's at an angle. And we also see that it is set off, right? It's not centered. It's set off because of his stance, because he's throwing his chest out. So if you think about like the contour of what's going on here, he's doing that sort of thing. It's like, It's like if a person were to do that, they'd be throwing their chest out like this and then going back to their hips, right? So on yours, we could see about moving his head back over some. If we're going with this pose, that his head maybe shift back this way a little bit, that his face is tilted, but it's not going downwards as much that way. He's kind of got his face up like this. And then he's got his chest kind of rolled out this way. And his legs are coming back here. And I'm thinking, think about what he could do. Like maybe he's talking to them. He's telling a story, and he's like gesturing with his wing, like, and then I did, and it's this sort of almost theater pose where, go look at Archimedes, the owl from the old animated Sword in the Stone, and see how they postured him. Because you can use an owl's feathers, his long feathers, to mimic fingers. So you could have him kind of like, yes, and then he's like gesturing with these fingers, and then he's got other ones over here, they're gesturing something else. And So kind of think about that and play around with just some simple gestures and poses to see what would maybe work a little bit better. Then lastly, let's look at another one with, I think the talons are kind of getting away from you here. This does not feel anatomically correct. That's like a plushie. So the legs are sort of off on that. Let's find some better legs. Like here's some owl legs. Owls usually keep their legs tucked in pretty good, but they do have decently long legs. Like, look at this. There's Mr. Owl legs. Yeah. So let's find some references that maybe give you some better legs. And then the talons are, you got the 3 of them, and they really come out in a split. And we don't quite have that here. You have more like toes, where the talons, they need to start in one point, and we can think about they're actually quite wide. They split pretty wide. And then they're going to make this sort of semicircle design, right? So you're going to have like one here and one here and one here. And then they're going to connect back in the back, but these sections are all going to be pretty long. So let's pay attention to that. Just find a couple of extra references along that line. As far as the scene, I'm not sure what you want to do with color. It doesn't have to be dark and moody. It can be if you want it to be. I had come across this one that I'd saved at some point. I think something like that could work really well. Just good, non-realistic. Again, you're going with like a storybook. So basic tones for stuff, not overly detailed. It's more like creating various patterns for the bushes and for the leaves. It's not drawing all the leaves, etc. So something like that. Or if you want to do it line-based, maybe something more like this. And you're just doing the color back there behind the lines. That's kind of cool too. So explore. Go out and find some references as far as what storybook sort of style you're wanting to do. Is it line-based? Is it painterly based? Is it real exaggerated? Is it more realistic? And try to have a style reference as far as how you want to take that. Esri, welcome. How's it going? Okay, we looked at that one and then went to these two. Okay, this one is Daniel Ruger. No questions or comments. So, okay, similar as the one we looked at a little earlier, we have like the small character face to face with a big character, and we have a fair amount of the canvas that's just being underutilized or not used. So I'm going to suggest moving in. All right, that's more of the part that we care about. But even if you did that, I don't know that the height and the width are really helping you that much. Like you could be running this scene like this. I don't know that you need a vertical. I think a horizontal could even be better, because that's everything that you really need to know right there. So consider that as an option as well. Unless you really want to feature some sort of background, which we don't have too much of if you do it that way. Number 2 is the lighting. And I'm not sure what you're trying to do with lighting. It feels a little too warm to buy as moonlight when the rest of the scene is so cold, like the background is really, really blue, but yet you've got this fairly warm light on them. I'm not sure. I put your trees back there, just kind of see how that looked. If you do put a lighter background there, then we probably need to start treating him in more of a silhouette so that he can stand out. But otherwise, just keep it really dark, kind of what you have it there. But I did tint it a little bit to the blue side, so it at least ties in the blue a little bit from the background to him and makes it feel like they sit in the same universe a little bit more. Here, if the light is coming this way, we can think about shadowing this side, and then some of this blue in the background. Maybe the background is getting lit by some light back there, and that allows us to use light on the character here and then let them transition into silhouette on the other side. And we just see a little bit of that blue back there too. Something like that, some small changes, but I always find that it is a good thing to do to let some things stand out because they're darker, some things stand out because they're lighter. Number three, we've got him sort of gripping the guy as if he was like grabbing a pencil, and which doesn't really make sense for feathers, since feathers can't do that. And maybe that's getting too realistic, but my thought is maybe he just has his set of feathers up here, and he just kind of has them laid out like, the guy's on his palm, right? And so he kind of has his feathers just out here flat, and the guy's like standing here on his feathers. And then it's not like he's trying to squeeze him, right? Okay, owl designs. Owls do come in a lot of different varieties, so it is up to you which one to do. But I think one of the things that's most iconic about owls is their eyes, how big their eyes are, how big and round their eyes are. So I would consider making his eyes a little bigger, maybe pushing them. You probably have to push him out a little bit just to give yourself some room so he doesn't look cross-eyed. But on the expression, their eyes don't work quite the same way as ours. And what you're going to see is that top lid cut down over the eyes to give it expression. So they have this extra part right here, which is kind of the fold that would drop down over the eyes. It's not like the eye itself squishes down, which is kind of what it looks like. But I'm not sure on the lower side if it can, but if you curve it up, it makes him look kind of like, what? And that could be kind of neat. Maybe catching a bit of that moonlight or something. So we can get some pretty good expression out of that. The beak would have a tendency to pick up quite a bit of that blue. Get that in there. So, yeah, no big changes. I think it's about getting what you already have, composition-wise, layout-wise, feature-wise, and just pushing it a bit further, getting a little more expression, pushing the features a little bit further, refining the pose of the feathers in the hand, that sort of thing. So, thank you for joining in, Daniel, and I hope you find that useful. Next up is Daniel Arturo. We had two Daniels. Yes, okay. Okay, I was just double checking. We haven't been dropping any frames. Okay, good. So Daniel Arturo is doing the Kinslayer sword. good view of it here. Value and color study I chose was number 2. But these were before my final design on the sword, so the final piece doesn't look that similar to the studies. Do you find yourself in that position working for WotC? Yeah, sometimes there's a good deal of difference between some of my sketches that I submit in and what the final is. For an example, I must have put that on a different piece. I will show you later, I guess. Which piece is it that I did that? I don't know. But yes, sometimes there is. Obviously, you don't want to be too drastic with it. But yeah, I've changed up the lighting or colors, between sketches and finals. And I don't know if I've ever had them have an issue with it. It just can't be changing anything that is supposed to be definite. Like if they're from some guild that always wears red, no, it's not okay if you change that. That has to be set that way. But if you're changing, the sky from being orange-based to being violet-based to, greenish or whatever, I doubt they normally don't care as long as it works for the image. I really like the color study of 1, but it seemed a little more Hearthstone and a one more Magic. Yeah, Hearthstone and some of those games are more about having a wider palette of colors and brighter colors. And I think you're trying to go for something a little more nuanced. Like this, it's more muted than that. So, if you want to go that way, that's fine. And it's just about sticking around that major color and not going too bright with any of your secondary colors. So, okay, after that, values, picture. Now, on these values studies, I think we need to practice with you doing other ways of doing value studies where these are all basically the same. You haven't really changed the value scheme on these very much. So, like if you're going to have a light blade here and this goes dark, then maybe this is lighter up here. And we have more dark down here. Or maybe the whole thing is dark. Maybe the whole thing is lit and everything else is in shadow. So let's see if we can find bigger, simpler options for the value change rather than I'm changing the hill from being medium to being dark. I'm changing this cloud, how light or dark this cloud is. Now, these all have very distinctly different value schemes and studies. So, more like that, you're going to run through some better variations and then find which one that you like and then do variations of that one. Maybe do 3 more variations of whichever one you like. Because right now, this is the value scheme that you're working with. And I say that, but there is no value scheme. Things have light and dark, but there is no value scheme. One thing that you should be aware of is if you ever resort to using glows like this, you're probably doing something wrong. Those are rarely, if ever, the way to handle something. There are a couple of times, like if I'm doing a neon sign, sure, I want my glow around whatever my neon sign is. I'm not going to go through all of it, but in this case, that's not what you want. This thing doesn't need to have a glow around it. It gives it kind of a fake look or a cheap way of doing something. So let's find a value scheme that works better. Is this whole thing lighter or darker? Is it gradiate from light to dark? What is the background doing? Is the background, what's the weather going on here? This is up to you, and something that needs to be figured out. Like, I'm thinking, what if, you know what? Let me turn that off. It's fine. It's like, okay, well, we can let that go into shadow, and that can be in shadow. And then this all has like magic glowing ice. All of it doesn't need to be white. We need some of it maybe to get to white. And then back here, it's sort of what you have with that one. You can have some warm tones back there, but they need to be real muted. They only really look warm, and they're not that warm. They're just off of gray. But they look warm because a lot of the other stuff in the scene is so much colder. And then I'm just thinking a lot of like haze, snow, fog. Probably not showing that much. And making more use of some backgrounds here. So more of that direction. We can get more color out of it. It's more has a simpler color scheme, simpler value scheme. I think the design is doing pretty good. You got some like a metal edge coming out of it, but you have this as well. I would like to see maybe this back edge also having some interest, like maybe the ice is forming, like a series of spikes on the other side. Those are really little spikes. Or maybe like a little serration. Probably some sort of serration would be cooler. Doing there. These two little pieces coming off seem a little... can we make them a little beefier? Can it come off and have, some sort of more manly part to it there, or can it have some of the barbed iron, wrapping around here, something like that? Yeah, very good. I'm assuming people just aren't saying anything because my chat hasn't come up with anything new in a while. Okay, this one is from Boss DeVries. And he was saying, I would like the transition between night and day. So essentially the owl is bringing night. I'm sorry, I need to blow my nose. Okay. Okay, I can breathe momentarily now. This is good. So, thoughts here. I really like this idea that this kind of spirit owl brings the night with him. But, and I agree with you, I think this first color study is good, but it doesn't bring that idea of transition between the two. So I got that, and I just made it black and white, and I painted out some of the background. And then I'm thinking, what if you use some of dusk colors? So something in that violet to peachy pink tone. I said I did another color study after I delivered this one. It's on my Facebook. I feel like it's a lot better. Well, I'm not going to go look it up right now, but maybe it's along this line, where the sky essentially has these colors, which is getting fairly close to the blues, and then you can have the blues and more of the violets coming off from here. And I think this sort of thing would be pretty good, and I could get that idea if I were to look at it. Maybe even the worms are kept even further down. And then this is where it gets to be much more cool. And I'm thinking the owl himself would be... No, stop. He's obviously not a normal owl, so I don't think he needs to be that in the normal brown tones. He could be all in your bluish tones. So he's going to stand out from the warm tones back there with being so much bluer. And then it's kind of what we have here on this Angelarium piece, where maybe the part here is kind of brighter. It's almost like that lamp. And so we've got these cool colors kind of coming off of here. Probably not that one. And the rest of him could be even a bit darker. And it's mainly that glow that we're catching there. And we can even have trailing bits of that same sort of thing coming off of this, and maybe a bit of it coming off of some of these wings. I think that would be cool. Something else that it reminded me of a little bit in Magic, and I believe it was in the Theros set, there was this stuff called the Nyx, and it was where something was enchanted, and anything that would be in shadow had the Nyx. And Nyx was a star-filled pattern that could be seen in anything in shadow. So like all of this stuff in here, you essentially could see stars. It's like you look, anything in the shadow would be like looking into the night sky. But anything in the lit, in any area, say that he was still catching some light in this area, then you wouldn't see the night Nyx pattern in that. But look it up, just Magic the Gathering, Theros, Nyx, enchantment, and see how that's handled. That might be a direction that you want to go. It's kind of a cool look. But yeah, I'm good with the overall pose. I think the concept is excellent. And if we can just get his entire color scheme to offset against the slightly warmer tones of the sky, and also remember that he doesn't need to be too realistic. He's obviously like a spirit creature, so don't worry about keeping necessarily the same patterning or the colors of a normal owl. That's it. That's about all the feedback on that one. You're in a good place, so on you go. Arlie is up next. Arlie is doing more of a cell animated approach to hers. It says, I took the liberty to move the image up so it's not hidden by your webcam. Hope you don't mind. Don't mind at all. I will take a moment to pull up here so you can see the Princess Mononoke. Mononoke? Yeah. Images for reference and value schemes and color schemes. And let's see, I'm still having a hard time trying to balance out the values and colors. A specific question I have about the crowd of owls in the background. If I have them cel shaded, they will look like as if they were animated, which is good, but it might also draw too much attention to them. So some of the rules or guides that I normally would mention don't apply as much to cel animated, because the idea is that this is something in motion and you don't have the full use of shading techniques in a cel animated. So no, to answer your question, no, I don't think having the owls in the background have an animated look makes them too distracting. They're tiny and it's fine and it fits in with the flow of what's going on. So that would not be a concern. I think if you just do what you're basically doing, which is good clean lines, straightforward lighting, then you're in a good place. And we don't need to get too fancy with the lighting. Like this is Princess Mononoke. I mean, this is top tier animation. And it's about the scene. It's not necessarily an individual piece of artwork. Not every still is a individual piece of artwork. And you're kind of in between. Let's talk about a couple of the other things going on in the scene. That was talking about them. Number 4. Number 4 is said, swatches need to head out. Might miss my critique. Just wanted to ask, does it matter if the sword challenge is a vertical or horizontal format? No, it doesn't. Jonathan, I think we already did yours, Jonathan. We're going backwards this time. Yeah, I was going counter alphabetical, whatever that's called. So we covered yours a little while ago. And let's see. Okay, one of the things that catches me a little off is just positioning of the characters. That she is basically directly underneath him, and that there's no way she's seen anything other than his belly. She's that close. And he's having to look absolutely straight down in order to see her. So let's move these guys back, at least I'm thinking in this area, so that she could reasonably look up and see his face, and he could reasonably look down and see her. And to that end, I would have a big tree stump, and just have like this is the tree stump that you stand on when you want to talk to Odru. And, she's standing up here and she's having audience with him. And then we can have some of the other animals maybe sitting up there around it with her. And maybe there's even like some little steps that's been carved into the tree stump there. So this is a thing, this is where we're taking a look at that. Okay, number 5. Number 5 is the ratio of the image. You've got this kind of squarish image, and I think it's working fine. But if you want a more cinematic feel, then I'm going to suggest pushing it from being squarish to having your normal 16:9 ratio, which is your widescreen movie ratio. And I think that would add in the feeling of it being from a movie, and it would make it feel more cinematic. So We're talking about pushing the scene to being wider, out here, or you would have to be cropping in quite a bit to get to a 16 by 9, but it's probably expanding the scene out on each side. Okay, number seven, I think you were sticking to this guy's pose too much without thinking about it, and if he was tilting his head, he'd be looking right into that belly. Him tilting his head that way would not help him see at all. If anything, he needs to be tilting his head the other way so that he can see around and see her. But I do like the way that you've played up his change of design so that he has like the little flourishes bits and in the patterning on him is not as detailed as normal patterning. Like in this and on these guys, but it evokes that same sort of patterning. And the way that you've adjusted this guy's design, so he obviously feels like an owl, but he has kind of more human characteristics, almost like a big mustache, and this feels like a big coif going around his head. I think that's pretty cool. One thing, though, is, let's take a look at this. Owls don't have whites in their eyes. That's a human thing. And if you want to do that, that's fine, but you realize that you're doing it. Otherwise, his whole eye should be orange. And then he has an iris. But there are no whites in his eyes. And that's just how owls are, right? And a lot of other animals, they don't have whites like we do. That's up to you, though. Make that change if you want to, but in some anamorphic animals, they do add whites in order to allow the viewer to more easily see where the character is looking. Yeah. Number 8, I think you have some good references over here as far as environment. I think the environment does need some work. This is particularly nice. Actually, all of these are particularly nice. I think this is too... It's really good rendition, but it's too, like, swampy for what you need. But I would like to see some effort put into this. So, in the background, having stuff like silhouetted trees back here. And then you have that light cutting in from back behind the trees. Yeah, and this glow effect also something not so much you're going to see in animation. And then you notice how they let a lot of the trees just go really dark, almost black for silhouette if they're closer. Like this guy could probably go to silhouette once he gets up out of the light. So, sort of that. We can punch up some of those colors and that contrast and give it a lot more mood. Also, look at the way that they're doing some of the terrain. That the trees often have a lot of layers of moss to them, or they've got, you know, really textured tree trunks, or there's vines climbing up the trees. This on the ground would be a really good way to do it as well. Something on this line where you have not just, it's not a golf course, but you've kind of got the big clumps of grass. So you've got the brown ground, you know, down here in between the grass, and the grass kind of comes in clumps. So you kind of figure out what your big clumps are, and then you start trying to build them. They have a little thickness, right? I mean, I can do it, it's just take a while. So you start building like a little thickness, and then they get lighter on the top, and then places in between them you're going to see more dirt. Yeah, so look at that for the ground on that one is really good. Also look at the trees, like these are really mossy trees. If you want to do it this way, or have the moss come up the bottom part of the tree and then it turns into more bark. I've got some trees right there by the house I'm in, and they're that way. They've got moss that comes up about that far proportionally to the tree. These like huge trees apparently. And then you want to kind of give some shading around the clumps to make them feel like they have volume. And then you hit part of them. Yep. So anyway, you got good references on that. I think you can pull that off. This guy, if you expand the scene out, you might want to move this guy or change his size, and he could be really good to put further over if you go more cinematic. If you do like a wider shot, you can have him over here, and it help bring you into the scene because most of the stuff is going to be here in the middle. So he'll just help pull you into the scene. And this guy could almost do the same thing on the other side, that he might be sitting closer to the camera, and him looking in is going to help pull you into the scene from the other side. Okay, really enjoying this, and enjoying seeing the style difference. You're pulling off the animation look very well. It's very clean, and now it's just time to step up some of the background work and positioning of the characters. Okay, Antonov. This is kind of cool reference here that Anton has. Take a look at that. I don't know if that's ice or glass or plastic or what, but that's pretty cool. That's a good reference. See, the more straight that you're looking through it, the more transparent it is. And then it's getting that fuzzy diffusion through it though. And then it's also, some of the black is coming through, but because it's not a perfect glass, perfectly transparent, it is lightening it up. That's good. I like looking at that. So some thoughts here. This is another one where I've got to question the choice of the vertical format for such a small horizontal element. And I don't think that you gain anything by necessarily doing it vertically that you wouldn't have from doing it horizontally. And if you did this as a horizontal scene, you could still have that. You could still have the frost effect and that in the background, but we get to zoom up and see the sword almost twice as big because we're not taking all of their canvas to do tops and bottom. Another option is, you know, the sword isn't horizontal. And it's kind of a sword in the stone sort of thing, right? Maybe it's like floating up here. and the magic isn't coming straight down, it's coming down the blade like this. And I'd still say we probably need to crop in, though. We still need to come into something more like that. I just don't see why you need that much extra. It just makes your main content smaller. The other option is we can also make the sword bigger, which there's no problem with that. You know, it's not like you don't have the room. So that's just some composition things. I think you can think about that and figure out what you want. Number 2, I love the frost power that it seems to have, that its coldness just, flows off of it and lands down here and makes anything around it become icy. And it's icing the plants and everything else. So that's really cool. I think the ice effect is working well. But I would like to see the design of the sword go further. This is almost looking more club-like, and it's just not very interesting. I mean, the effect is interesting, the execution is good, but it just isn't a very interesting design. It's like if we brought in a pommel, then all of a sudden it does start looking more like a sword. Maybe you wanted a different kind of pommel. I don't know. More like a Roman sort of thing. And then we don't have either the iron antlers or the iron thorns on this, so those do need to be incorporated. And can we get the blade to maybe make some better patterns? Like, can we get some big cool serrations out of it? Maybe it's even got like an axe thing on the back side of it. I don't know. Maybe the pommel has, a bit of metal or something, and then it has the ice on the end just to help balance its weight off. Maybe icy spikes coming off the base. It has icy spikes. Oh, do you mean like the sword? Like it could have like ice spikes coming off here or something. Something like that could work. Let's see. What else? Using an overlay layer is a good, easy way to get this sort of effect where I can just go in with a blue, and I would suggest adding a bit more color to it. The white is good. I think it's pretty good, but we can just make it pop a bit more by adding in some cyans and some blues. And if you wanted to reach over to violets, you might even do that. So you can push it that way quite a bit, color-wise, and it would help make it stand out. Taking probably not as far as your inspiration over here, but a bit more that direction, color-wise, could help make it pop. What else? We've got this background character here, but unless you develop him more or put some more light on him, I'm going to just say take him out. I'm not against him being there to give context for like size or the guy's wary of it. That's fine. But he's just so dark that it's almost useless to have him in there unless you're going to make him stand out a bit more. Let's see. Last thing, I do like your wintry feel going on, and I would consider having some snow effect. Maybe there's just some, that's overlay, that's right. Maybe there's some snow that has kind of coming down and landed on, you know, like this stone back here. Some little flakes that have got caught in different spots. And you just see a few wandering flakes. And it would just break up sort of this whole monotony of the gray stone. Unless you wanted to push it further into like a, you know, this thing's kind of underlighting. Bouncing up more light on that thing. I do like the stone. It's well executed, and the fact that you tilted it made it look more like ruins is kind of cool. So, here we go. That was my thoughts on this one. I hope you do something with those. Keep with it. I love the direction, beautiful execution. Let's just get that idea and hone it a bit more. And I was just looking at some of your studies here. Now, I think I like some of the base on the studies more than this. This is just a big bunch of ferns, which isn't very interesting. Where some of these have a lot more character, like having the rocks with the snow down here. That's kind of cool. Or having the ferns but with the rocks. Yeah, let's go more of this direction. Or even just the rocks. Yeah, I think it gives more sense of depth. Having some of the plants there with the frost on them is good. Let's keep some of that. But let's not just make the whole base of it a bunch of plants. All right, last one up is by Andy. Andy has a couple of comments saying, this is a giant ancient spirit of the aurora that flies once every 10,000 years. 10,000 years would give you such a crick in the neck. So we're very lucky to see it. Have several questions. I've chosen this pose for wings because it looks more interesting to me than the default wing spread. But theoretically, the spirit will touch the earth if it is a real flight cycle. Is it fine to sacrifice logic for a better look? In this case, yeah. And because it's a spirit, I mean, it's just light. So what if it touches the ground? Right? It's just light. So I think it works completely fine for this image. And I wouldn't worry about the pose. You're filling the frame good with it. It has a quick, normal, easy silhouette to register. So all's good. Okay. Are you saying the concern and recognizable color of the aurora is greenish, but it brings a bit of a necromancy feel? Is it okay? Thank you. No, I did not have that feeling until I read it. That I think about it also being a common necromancy related color, because I do know that a lot of the aurora is that sort of green. So I just registered it as being, aurora color. And this is a really good concept. I appreciate you having the creativity to step out and do something this different with it and taking it a really interesting direction. Okay. Now, talking about just improving the piece, a couple of ideas. One is I would move the moon. And the moon being there is just kind of like, it keeps grabbing my attention. It's almost like he's looking at it. It's right between his wings. So I'm going to take it out and utilize it a bit more by assuming that the moon is back behind us. And that way we can have some moonlight hitting these guys from the back. And I help pull out their forms. All right, so we have some moonlight coming back this way, hitting them, and then that takes it out of there, and we don't have to worry about that. Next would be 4. 4 was the lighting there. 5 is the aurora. Looking at all the references that I see of the aurora is not directly up and down. It usually has a tilt. You see the tilt. All of this aurora has tilt. But this aurora is completely up and down. So I'm going to suggest whatever your glow is, that we do the same thing. So this need to have more of this tilt. Okay, one moment. David says, Clint, also blur a little bit of the reflection in the lake. Yeah, we need to talk about lake for a second. It's pretty good, but the lake is perhaps a little too clear for what it should be. And also see that the lakes are the same thing as the top, but they're a little darker and a little blurrier. And right now, it's like the same value as the other. So if we were to grab the lake, filter, blur, motion blur, side to side. Blur, Gaussian blur, just a little Gaussian blur on top of that. Probably just a bit more that way. A little bit darker, little bit blurrier, and I think it reads as water better. Unless you're really going to lean into the mist on the background, this is probably just going to be darker, and just simplify that. If you have a line back there, it's like this, it's just black. The silhouette and the reflection just run into each other, and that's okay. If you want to have a thin line, you can do that. Just kind of the water reflection. But I wouldn't put it on the whole thing. Just a couple of spots that maybe it's catching it. So, yeah. 6 here. I didn't make a line for it, but I did want to mention the legs here seem a little odd. I think that's... see what other references you can find of the feet position. I feel like we should have them tucked up more so they're not really visible. I would be looking to capitalize on that tail shape more than the claws and the feet hanging down. And yeah, or letting them go off into auroras themselves. But otherwise, they almost look like paws, like a little cat paws hanging down. So see if there's another reference just to how they fold those things up, or if we could get those turning into auroras as well. Consider shifting some of your aurora colors. So we set this to color. So like some aurora is going to be more blue-green. And then other parts are going to be real yellow. And so maybe we have it like the further out it goes from his head, the more blue-green it gets. And then, or maybe the further away, you know, the older it gets, the older the trail, the more, you know, blue it becomes. But let's bring in some more variation, because right now, if we would keep it just like this, it's a little too monotone as far as how much of the same green is going on. But lovely piece. I like the direction. And that's everybody. So thank you everyone for being a part of the Sword and Owl Challenge. A lot of great submissions. And if you want to jump in and you want to take this on yourself, you won't get a review, but if you want to take this on yourself, you can go out to the Swatches group, and there is a link out there where you can go download the brief and the inspiration images and the template for putting in all your references in your studies. And you're welcome just to, you know, try your hand at it if you've been inspired to do that. Next week, we should have another live stream, Q&A live stream. I don't know if I'll have a Vibrance or not. I know that I have several projects all kind of coming up at the same time. So we'll see what's going on. Thank you. Yeah, I will be feeling, I imagine I will feel much better tomorrow after I sleep tonight. Last night was the worst, and I'm getting over it. Now I'm just getting rid of all the all the clogged, you know, sickness. And anything else? No, I think that's good. Oh, just to let you guys know who are patrons, I am working on the video, but this whole getting sick thing has put me a couple of days behind. It's going well. I'm putting together all the example images that I'll be pointing at and talking about throughout the video, and I have perhaps half of them finished, and it's a lot of good information. Not quite the same that I've seen somewhere before, so it ought to be helpful and help you understand the subject. So yeah, 2 more weeks before the finals are due, and I will catch you guys then on this one, but Q&A next week. Appreciate you joining me. Till next time, keep drawing.